Ayo Dosunmu was not the only player the Timberwolves acquired at the deadline. Why the Timberwolves had Julian Phillips included, and which player or players might he be replacing in the future? Next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. I'm Ben Beecken. Welcome to Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're going to talk about Julian Phillips. And if you missed it, there was a second guy in the Timberwolves Bulls trade last Thursday. And just in the wake of the deadline and the rush of games Friday, Sunday, Monday, haven't had a chance to break down Julian Phillips' game. So I want to dig in a bit on him as a prospect. And he really is still that, just in his third year in the league, and was a one-and-done college player. So I want to talk about him as a draft prospect and what he's done so far as a pro, primarily at the NBA level, very limited G League action. So the type of player he is, and also my opinion on who he may ultimately be replacing, who he may be insurance against as the Timberwolves consider what this roster looks like as they continue to add to their books, right? Like there's an Ayo Dosunmu contract extension coming up eventually, right? So they need to find cheap guys to fill out their rotation, affordable contracts to fill out their books and, stay out of the tax as much as possible. So my take on the type of player that Julian Phillips is and exactly who on this roster he could be insurance against moving forward. So we'll do all that, talk about Phillips and what he brings to the table. Then we'll talk about Wolves Blazers tonight. We've not seen Portland since opening night in mid-October. So we'll break down that matchup. We'll take a peek at the Western Conference standings and some optimism here as we head into the All-Star break this weekend. So a packed show today. Big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. All right. So the Timberwolves did this trade with the Bulls last Thursday, and they could have done the trade without accepting Julian Phillips back. And like the financials would have worked without it. And, there's some argument to be made, like, hey, they could have just done it. They could have filled the roster with multiple buyout guys. Now, I guess there's some salary cap maneuvering to be done there because, like, the whole reason they haven't brought Mike Conley back yet or signed anybody else is because they would still end up over that first apron and end up paying some tax if they rush to fill those slots. There's a needle they have to thread where they have to get past a certain day so that the prorated salary fits neatly into the books, but there's also the roster minimum checkpoints of 14 and then 15 guys. So they're trying to thread a needle of adding back Mike Conley and filling that final roster spot, very likely by promoting Johnny Juzang to a standard contract. It hasn't been done yet, but they could have done the trade without Phillips and found another way to fill that roster spot, maybe two buyout guys or whatever the case might be. Instead, they wanted Julian Phillips in this trade. So why is that? Well, Julian Phillips was a second-round pick. He was the fifth pick of the second round. He was widely projected to be an early to mid-second round pick. There were some folks in the leading to the 2023 draft that thought there's a chance he could be a very late first-round pick. Completely projectable. And what I mean by that is he was a project coming out of college. He was a one-and-done at Tennessee on one of the nation's best defensive teams, one of the best college teams in the nation defensively that season. And he was a huge part of it. He was all freshman SEC at Tennessee, lockdown defender, switchable, versatile, was asked to play down low a bunch. And by the way, we'll get into his size and everything, but he's now listed at, actually combine time was like right around a 6'6", 6'7", really 6'7", with a wingspan of over 6'11". So he can play down low in the SEC, but was switchable and did guard primary ball handlers at times, was very versatile defensively for that team. And he was seen as like a project 3-and-D type guy with, if the offense comes along, he could be more than that. He's still kind of the same guy in terms of what he profiles at, in my opinion. I think he's filled out a little in the last 2+ years. It does seem like if you go back and watch him in college and watch him now, it looks like the body's gotten a little bit thicker and stronger. Now I'm talking about a difference of 2.5 years, right? This is his third year in the league. That to me is the only major difference between Tennessee Vols Julian Phillips and now Timberwolves Julian Phillips, here less than a week after the trade. Rookie year, he only played in 40 games, 8 minutes a game for a mediocre, as always, Bulls team. And then for a 39-win Bulls team last season, he did play in 79 games. He was a regular rotation piece and averaged just over 14 minutes per game. Started 5 games for the team. Only averaged 4.6 points and 2 rebounds per game. Shot 2 threes per game, but only at 32.7%, which is also exactly what he's shooting this year. So he's 32.5% for his NBA career. Relatively limited volume, 240 shots over the last 3 years from outside the arc, although he did shoot 153 last year. Again, 2 a game across 79 games, and he was well below league average. So the shooting isn't great. And you go back to college, it wasn't great in college either. It was pretty miserable. He was 24% outside the arc on 1.5 attempts per game. He was just 46.5% on 2-point shots in college at Tennessee across 32 games. And encouragingly, he was a good free throw shooter. On nearly 4 attempts per game, he was 82% from the line. So there was a lot of projectability when it came to his offensive game coming out of college, saying like, okay, if he can make free throws that suggests that he has good touch, the shooting form's okay, it's not completely, lost, and he could improve. And I guess in a sense, he went from 24% outside the arc in college to a NBA 3, and now he's, 32.5%. So there has been some improvement, but not massively so. Now, let's talk about the overall profile before we get a little bit, too much into the 3-point percentage stuff, because I have some more thoughts there. He's an athletic, switchable forward, which is what he was in college. He really does profile as a 3-and-D guy, but currently without the 3-point shot. He is a plus defender. I think he's been good as a pro on some pretty bad Bulls defenses. So, like, if you look at some of the box score stats, they're not super positive for him. But the tools are obviously there. The feel I thought was there in college too. Like if you watch some of the tape on him at Tennessee, like he kind of like he knows where he's at. He knows what he's doing defensively. So I think he does fit the role of a versatile defensive player at the NBA level. Long and athletic. He's 6'7", 6'11 and a half wingspan, and is pretty dynamic defensively. And actually, if you go back and watch, the Timberwolves played the Bulls in the preseason. And in that preseason game, I went back and watched all the Julian Phillips clips from that game. He's explosive. He scored 17 points, second most of anybody on the Bulls in that game next to Buzelis. 17 points on 5 of 10 shooting. He was only 1 of 5 on threes, got to the line and made all 6 of his free throws. He had 6 rebounds in just 22 minutes in that game against the Wolves. And he was explosive. The quick second jump ability, the second jump that he had on the offensive glass, the nose for the ball on both sides of the floor on the boards was impressive. I thought with and without the ball, he looked explosive, looked really good in transition, had a couple of nice defensive plays in that game. The shot to me, and we'll talk a little bit more about this here in a second, the form is okay. He's got a weirdly wide base when he shoots it. And so the release isn't super quick either. But he obviously has good touch. You can see it around the rim. You can obviously 6 of 6 at the line, 82% at the collegiate level from the free throw line. And so far at the NBA level, he's 77%. So the dude can shoot free throws. He has touch around the rim. And you can even tell in the 3-point shot, but it's kind of like he's steering the ball toward the basket. It's not very fluid from distance. And the wide base is weird. And again, it kind of leads to a bit of a slower release. There is some hope there, though, because he shot the ball well from the corners, which is what I was getting at a minute ago. And again, relatively small sample size in terms of the quantity of corner attempts. I mean, he's, again, 2.5 years in the league. But on corner 3-point attempts, he's shooting 39%. 39%. And last year, when he played a 14 minutes a game, he was almost 41% from outside the arc in the corners. So, a lot to like there. If he can just hit corner threes at a clip that's greater than what we've seen from, say, Jalen Clark, more on that in a second, then he is a potential fringe rotation guy. And we're also talking about someone who's only 22 years old. The corner 3-point percentage to me is very encouraging. I want to talk more about the Jalen Clark point and how Julian Phillips could fit into the Timberwolves rotation, who I think, or where I think he could slide into this team moving forward, and why I think Jalen Clark and one other player could be at risk at having their spots taken by Julian Phillips as early as soon as next year. We'll break all that down next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone who's willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't just want anyone who can help. I want someone who has real experience that can jump right into the role that I'm hiring for. And that's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. Helps you save time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. Plus, with the sponsored jobs feature, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the 1 minute that I've been talking to you about Indeed, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is also brought to us by our friends at Game Time. There is nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. And that's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. All you got to do is pull the Game Time app up, pick an upcoming NBA game like tonight against Portland, the last game before the All-Star break for the Wolves. And you can have your tickets locked in within minutes. You can see your price the all-in price up front. So that way you're not dealing with any surprise fees at checkout. You can also see the view from your seat before buying. It'll help make your decision easy. And zone deals stand out. Choose the section, the Game Time, and Game Time will help pick the seats for you, and you'll save if you do that. Plus, there's great last-minute options if you decide last minute you want to attend Wolves Blazers tonight. Game Time is the best way to do exactly that. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen of the day. And of course, thanks for helping to make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. You get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Wolves, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. You also get an invite to the members-only Discord chat for the Locked On Everydayer Club. We have a dedicated Locked On Wolves channel. Been in there quite a bit here recently, talking, of course, trade deadline, all things Timberwolves all the time. There's a group chat going with a bunch of us listeners of Locked On and myself. You could also check out the general Locked On NBA channel there as well on Discord. You can go to lockedonwolves.supercast.com to learn more, or visit the link in the show notes right now to learn more about that Everydayer Club. All right. So Julian Phillips, I think that there are a lot of similarities between what Julian Phillips brings to the table, what Jalen Clark brings to the table. The difference is the offensive upside is greater for Phillips, and he's a lot bigger. Not a lot. He's 2 inches taller, 2 inch longer wingspan, approximately. Clark in the draft was listed at 6'5" with a 6'9" wingspan. Phillips is 6'7" with a 6'11.5" wingspan. The athleticism is greater than Jalen Clark's. It just is. Jalen Clark is a great defender. He really is a plus on-ball defender. I think he's pound for pound a better defender than Julian Phillips, but you can't teach the size and athleticism and switchability, versatility that Phillips has. Clark has the lower center of gravity. He can get up underneath guys. He's had some problems lately. Clark has with defending without fouling, and being appropriately physical. I think at times is a challenge for him. And I think prior to the Achilles injury for Jalen Clark, I think it was an ACL for Jalen Clark. I'm blanking on which one it was. I think it was Achilles, actually. Prior to that injury, his last year at UCLA, he was still a modest athlete, like, above average athlete, but nothing crazy. Julian Phillips is a plus athlete. Like, he tested as one of the best at the NBA Combine a couple of years ago, 2023. And again, with the size and the wingspan of nearly 7 feet, it's like leveling up that 9th, 10th guy in the rotation role if you can replace Jaylen Clark with Julian Phillips. And one of the reasons why I think there's a chance he ultimately does replace him is because Jaylen Clark's a restricted free agent at the end of this year. Remember last year when he's elevated from a two-way to a vet minimum deal, or I guess technically it is a vet minimum, to a minimum deal, a standard contract. It was the rest of last year and it was this year. So that ends this season. He is a restricted free agent, which also means the Wolves could bring him back at a relatively affordable number, but it's still going to be a little bit more than what Julian Phillips will make next year. Julian Phillips has a team option for next season. He was a second-round pick. So Phillips will make about $2.4 million. Jaylen Clark's probably going to be in the $3 million range, if my math's correct, when it comes to what that restricted free situation looks like, right? If there's a qualifying offer, if not, if they, depending on what happens, right? Like we saw this with Jordan McLaughlin the first time. The Timberwolves, I think, re-signed him to I think pulled the qualifying offer and then re-signed him at a deal that was a little bit less than that, but multiple years, if I remember correctly. They could do something similar with Jaylen Clark. No idea if there's going to be a market for Jaylen Clark. He's obviously not going to get paid anything crazy, but for a team that's butting up against the apron, and of course was over the first apron prior to the trade deadline, the Timberwolves are going to be considering that. And if you can get, a net neutral role filled, I should say. It's a weird way to say that, but like if you're filling the Jaylen Clark, if you're not getting worse in that role, right? Call it the 10th man role, and you're saving over $500,000, that's just against the cap. That doesn't include if you get over, tax penalties and all that stuff. You're saving some money in that regard. And you're getting younger by a couple of years. You're getting longer. You're getting more athletic. You're getting more positionally versatile. And the corner three thing, that matters. I mean, Jaylen Clark was, shot the three well last year in it was under 100 attempts. He shot 94 threes last season. And ultimately it looked good because the volume was so low. And now this season, he's under 29% from three overall. From the corners, he's only 30% from three. Last year, he was 43%. Again, limited volume. But this year, he's under 30% from the corners, and Julian Phillips for his career is 41%. Now, both relatively limited volume. But I believe the upside that we've seen from Julian Phillips, or that Julian Phillips has shown over 2.5 years in the NBA, again, younger, without the major injury history and all that stuff, I just think whatever we think of the Jaylen Clark role, and currently it's basically the 9th to 10th guy. This is before TJ Shannon comes back. I think that Julian Phillips can do that role. Now, the other layer is TJ Shannon. TJ Shannon is more dynamic offensively, and he's not as good defensively. So I'm not at all suggesting he's the same guy as Julian Phillips. But there could be some crossover there, depending on what happens down the road. Now, Shannon's still got one more year before you got to worry about options and everything. As a first-round pick, the Timberwolves will have a choice to make in the fall to pick up the 27-28 option for TJ Shannon. But that's going to be a $5 million option. Obviously, the cap goes up, but it still becomes a little bit a bigger chunk of that. Whereas Julian Phillips, that season, would need a new contract, but he's likely going to be less than $5 million. So it's all this more bites of the apple, which is what I like to say about offensive rebounding, right? This gives Tim Connolly more bites at the apple. And what I mean by that is more options to fill the 9th, 10th roles. He's got a versatile 22-year-old with upside and great athleticism, but some limitations offensively in Julian Phillips. And I didn't really talk about the motor earlier. I talked about the instincts on the glass, but he plays hard all the time. Go back and watch that preseason game. I've never said those words before. Go back and watch the Wolves-Bulls preseason game. It was the second to last preseason game in October. And the motor was great on Julian Phillips. That's one guy. Jaylen Clark has proven to be a plus NBA defender, very limited offensive game, a little bit smaller, a little bit less athletic, and he's going to be kind of medium expensive. And then you go to TJ Shannon, who's affordable-ish now, but gets more expensive in a couple years. He's already 25 because he was a 5-year college guy. And so he's the oldest of them. He's going to be the most expensive of them, but also has the greatest offensive upside. But what do you need out of this role, right? So these are all questions that Tim Connolly and the front office are asking themselves. So by acquiring Julian Phillips, you give yourself another guy in this same kind of category of of end of the rotation, fringe rotation guys with a little bit of upside who do a couple of things really well. And now there's 3 different versions of this player. Likely 2 of the 3 are on the team next year, maybe all 3, but 2 years from now, you may only have 1 of the 3. So this gives you some time to evaluate those options. At basically wings, right? Jalen Clark is technically a guard, but and I guess TJ Shannon mostly plays guard too. But these guys are wings, right? They're 2/3. Phillips can play some 4. That's what these guys are, and so it gives Tim Connolly more to evaluate. So plus athlete, a very good defender, developing outside shot that seems to have improved some from the corners, dynamic athleticism and motor, really kind of what you want. Almost in some ways a little bit of a smaller Josh Minot in some ways. I think that there maybe is a little bit more kind of consistent rotation upside because of maybe a little bit better ball handling and a little bit better. He's not a great ball handler, but better than Minot. Like he's somewhere in that Jalen Clark to Josh Minot realm where it's defense first, motor and all that. But the athleticism is closer to Minot. The size is a little closer to Minot than it is Jalen Clark. So I like the acquisition. I like him being thrown into the deal. It's also entirely possible he barely plays and they don't pick up the option and he's gone. But this was the flyer. They wanted to get him in the building, get to see him in practice and, all that. I was surprised to see, by the way, that Phillips has only played in like 15 G League games or like less than that over the last couple of years. So very limited data there. That felt like a disservice that Chicago didn't put him in the G League more as a rookie. And again, he played quite a bit last year, but like, this is a guy who needed to play in the G League. I mean, he's still only 22. He was a one and done in college and on a team that didn't, like I talked about Tennessee's defense. They didn't do a whole lot offensively. Like he wasn't in a real system there. And he just turned 22, by the way, too, a couple months ago. So still some upside there for Phillips, and I'm excited the Wolves have him. All right, let's close by talking Wolves Blazers. Haven't seen Portland in a hot minute here, so we'll talk about that matchup, and we'll talk about the Western Conference landscape right now for the Wolves as we head into the All-Star break. Do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. The Winter Games are officially here. If you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports that you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling, that seems to be the one every year. People love the drama. They start slow, somehow get intense fast. That's a fun thing to look at on FanDuel. There's also speed skating that are, of course, decided by inches. There's hockey games that feel different right from the opening faceoff because of the pride of country. It just makes it that much more intense, a lot like NHL playoff hockey in some ways. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. My family loves, really all the above, all the skiing stuff, the snowboarding, the ice, the figure skating, really. My daughters love that. Check it all out on FanDuel. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, let's talk Wolves Blazers. So, believe it or not, Timberwolves have not seen Portland since opening night. That was a game at the time, like I previewed this with that game with Mike Richmond from Locked On Blazers. He was optimistic this could be a play-in team, and that's exactly where they are right now. This was so long ago that Chauncey Billups was still their coach. The only game he coached all year. I'm pretty sure this was the only game he coached in before he was indicted and is no longer running that team. Tiago Splitter, by the way, acting head coach for the Blazers, if you want to feel old. If you don't know who that is, then you're not old. We'll just say that. That was a game the Wolves trailed by 4 at halftime, and they were down 7 going to the fourth quarter. Ultimately came back and won. Ant had 41, again, opening night, dropped 5 threes on 10 attempts, a perfect 8 of 8 at the line. 7 boards for Ant in that one. He was fantastic. Julius Randle was very good, 19, 7, and 6. And the leading scorer off the bench, again, illustrating how long ago this was TJ Shannon. He played the most minutes and had the most points of any bench player for the Timberwolves. 25 minutes, 10 points on 4 of 7, knocked down his only 2 3-point attempts. He also had 5 rebounds and 5 assists. Now, since that point, it was actually tied for the most minutes he played in any game, except for that random Warriors game right before Christmas when he played 30 minutes. I actually think, was that a game that Ant missed? I don't know. Anyway, TJ Shannon played 25 minutes in this game and played double-digit minutes in the first 6 games of the year and then got hurt. Like, he was still a double-digit minute per game guy until he hurt his foot 7 games in. But this was probably his best all-around game this season, other than he had the OKC game, I guess, after he came back from the injury when he was really good. He had 18 points in that one. So besides that, this was a really good TJ Shannon game. That's how long ago this was. Like, we're 2 injuries and Shannon out of the rotation and all that stuff, since then. But the Wolves won that game by 4. That was like, my recollection from that game was the Timberwolves lucked out with some missed shots by Portland late. Minnesota's offense was pretty good in this game. I thought the defense was pretty subpar. Obviously Denny Avdia's had an incredible year. He was great. Jeremy Grant had 29 points off the bench in that game, was 10 of 14 shooting, really hot shooting from outside the arc, especially early in that game from Jeremy Grant. Portland as a team overall right now is in the play-in. They are coming into this game. They're 26-28. So it's really the top 10 in the West are pretty comfortable right now. Like, there's a 4.5 game gap between the Clippers in 10 and Memphis in 11. And Portland and Clippers are right there at 9 and 10. So they're very likely going to be a play-in team. A lot to like about this team. Scoot Henderson's back, by the way. He, of course, was hurt all season. He's played in 2 games now and is playing like 20 minutes a game off the bench. So Scoot will play in this game. Shaedon Sharpe is questionable. He did not play on Monday when they beat the Sixers actually pretty easily. And that's the big one. So, like, we don't know if Sharpe's going to play as of this recording, and Scoot Henderson is going to play, or at least he's not on the injury report, and he played in the last 2 games. So, now the rest of their team, Jeremy Grant has continued to be Jeremy Grant, a reliable veteran, scores a bunch, shoots the 3 well. Shaedon Sharpe's been a really good scorer, if at times inefficient, but a solid scorer. Denny Avdia has been a revelation for Portland this year, averaging 25, 7, and 7. Toumani Camara has maybe been a little bit disappointing given his breakout last year. He's still averaging 13 a game, still a good defender, 36% from 3. Maybe a little lower than they would like to have seen. But the depth just isn't really there. They just traded for Vit Krejci from Atlanta, of course, former Timberwolves training camp invitee, Vit Krejci, who was in a rotation role at the Hawks last few years. This side of now adding Krejci and Scoot Henderson coming back, like, this is a pretty top-heavy team. There's basically like 8 or 9 rotation guys you can really trust, which I guess is also the Wolves. But it's a top-heavy team that isn't really great in any one area. They're pretty, like, just below middle of the pack in a lot of places when it comes to, like, the 4 factors and stuff. They are currently the 19th ranked offense and 19th ranked defense. They are dead last in turnover rate offensively. So they turn the ball over like nobody's business. They also are a poor rebounding team on the defensive glass. They've been a good offensive rebounding team this year, although they didn't really kill the Wolves other than some timely, or I guess untimely, boards in the first matchup. But they ultimately only had 7 offensive rebounds for them by Toumani Camara. But, like, you look overall at their roster, and again, they've been really good on the offensive glass this season. Like, Donovan Clingan, who somehow didn't have any offensive rebounds in the first game against Minnesota, has been awesome. He's leading the league in offensive rebounds per game. So, like, he's the guy you got to look out for there. Ex-Celtic Robert Williams off the bench for them is an offensive rebound machine as well when he plays. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But again, defensive rebounding, they're not good. And Minnesota should be okay there. Part of that is probably they shoot a lot of threes. They're actually 3rd in 3-point rate, but they're 2nd to last in percentage. So there's a lot of potential offensive rebounds. And that's part of the reason why they're so great on the offensive glass. But then when it comes to the defensive glass, they're just not a very good defensive team. And so Minnesota should be able to exploit them there. They do play pretty fast. They're in the top 3rd of the NBA in pace. So if you're the Wolves, don't get sucked into an up and down game too much. Make sure you're boxing out. Do not contest and release against this team. Simply contest, box out. Don't let the guards and wings crash down to rebound and put a body on Clingan especially. And you should be all right in this game. We've said that many times before, however. Scoot Henderson, excited to see him play. It's been a minute, and that'll be fun to see him out there again. 20 minutes a game over his 2, and he scored 23 total points across those 2 games. So be nice to see him as well. And then obviously if Shaedon Sharpe plays, he's the guy outside of Avdia who's going to be generally the straw that stirs the drink for this team. Just keeping an eye on what Shaedon Sharpe's able to do off the dribble. So that's going to be a lot of Jaden McDaniels on that assignment, probably a lot of Jalen Clark as well, and also Ayo Dosunmu if you're the Wolves. Okay, half step back looking at the Western Conference very quickly. As of this recording, I'm recording this as the Spurs are dominating the Lakers, so assuming that they hold on and beat the Lakers, LA and Minnesota will be in a virtual tie for 5th in the Western Conference, and they'll be a game behind the Rockets and Nuggets, who are in a virtual tie for 3rd in the Western Conference. The Spurs, who are beating the Lakers, are going to be pretty comfortably in the 2 spot as of right now. Obviously, it's very important to get into the 3 spot would be ideal, so that then you're talking about playoff matchups. You're on the opposite side of the bracket as OKC. So I realize we're 24 games away from the end of the season, but still being within a game of the 3 spot is a nice place to be if the Wolves can beat Portland and maintain that positioning going into the All-Star break. They're also only a game up on Phoenix. Actually, they're about to only be a half game up. Well, no, Phoenix just won. So as of right now, as I record this, they're a half game up on Phoenix for the 6th spot in the Western Conference. So a lot of work to be done for Minnesota. The schedule gets pretty hard after the All-Star break. We'll talk about that later, but obviously a very important game against Portland here tonight. The live postcast with Jack and Luke will be, of course, over on YouTube on Locked On Wolves. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be the next episode in this feed tomorrow or tonight following the game. And otherwise, if you can't catch it live, you can listen to the postcast on wherever you listen to podcasts on the Locked On Wolves feed. I will be back late after the game / early Thursday morning with the post-game pod. And then Friday, we'll get you ready for All-Star weekend. I'll give you some predictions, my predictions for what will go down on All-Star Saturday, which is my favorite day of the weekend. And then also, of course, Ant playing in the big game on Sunday. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. A reminder that if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Wolves ad-free plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonwolves.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, after this episode, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 National NBA YouTube channel. On audio, make sure that you make your second listen NBA Game Night over on the Locked On NBA feed. Of course, Locked On Wolves is also part of the very same Locked On Podcast Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.